Hey guys, this is Willow. Just quickly before you listen to chapter 2, I just want to say there are pictures in this chapter, but I couldn't find the exact ones. So if you want to see them, then if you go on to Wattpad, I'll put the link in the description. If you go onto it, then you can see the pictures because there are also going to be pictures in chapter 2 and onwards. On chapter 3, I mean, and onwards. So if you want to see them, then I'll put the link in the description of every chapter so you can see the pictures. Anyways, on to chapter 2. Hello everybody, it's Willow and today we'll be reading chapter 2 of Back from the Dead. It is called Off to America and I hope you enjoy. It was the next day and Izuku was pacing in his room. The night before he had explained everything to his dad, and when I say everything, I mean he told him about all the bullying and his mother's abuse. He told his father about his addiction to weed and cigarettes that he stole from his mother whenever he got the chance, though he explained that he only smoked when he was stressed or couldn't sleep. He has insomnia and he smokes to help him sleep sometimes. And what happened with All Might and the Sludge villain, then ending with him killing himself and explaining what happened with Royal and all the other ghosts he interacted with. His dad had listened to everything with an open mind and comforted his son the best he could from another country, not judging him in any way. At the end of Izuku's explanation, his dad had taken the time to process all the information and come up with a solution. You should come live with me. I won't be around all the time since I am the #1 hero here in America, but I'll be there for you as much as I can. Plus, the house is quite lonely and way too tidy for my liking. I have no one here to come and fill it up and make a mess of, had been Hasashi's words. It took some convincing. Izuku not wanted to be a bother or a burden to his father, but eventually he agreed. So now, Izuku was in his room, waiting for his dad to call or text him. His father had told him before he hung up the phone the night before that he would sort everything out, even sending one of his bodyguards to help Izuku on the flight over and keep him safe. He had his bags packed, which were only his backpack with notebooks and other little things, and his duffel bag filled with some clothes, and was now pacing around his room with his phone clutched in his hand, awaiting his father's call. Izuku was planning on disappearing, not even writing a note to his mother or even to Kasky, though Izuku was sure that if he did, the blonde wouldn't care anyways. He was going to fly to America and live with his dad. He was going to disappear into thin air. No more bullying, no more neglect and abuse, only the warm, safe and comforting environment his father had always created for him. Even when he found out he was quirkless, Hasashi never once degraded his son for it, only ever praised him for the little things he did and helped him grow as a person. Even when he moved to America and started only talking to him over the phone, Hasashi was still there for him, was always his safe place. Izuku was snapped out of his thoughts by his phone ringing. He halted his pacing and looked down at the device. It was his dad. He hit the accept button and held it towards his ear. "Hello?" Izuku greeted. "Hey son, you doing okay?" The question was said softly from the other end of the call. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Inko hasn't showed her face since last night, so she's probably out drunk in some dude's bed. I'm a little sore though, since just before she left, she did add to my collection of scars. Izuku responded truthfully, with an exhausted sigh, rubbing his forehead with his spare hand. "Yeah, I'm sure she is, and I'm so sorry you have to go through that, but you won't have to deal with her again, so she doesn't matter right now. What matters is that I'll be seeing you in person for the first time in 5 years by the end of the day. How exciting is that?" Hasashi's voice switched from sad and worried to happy and excited like a light switch. Izuku couldn't stop the small smile that spread across his lips even if he had tried. "Super exciting, Dad. I can't wait," Izuku responded with a small chuckle. "Well, you should get a knock on your door in about 10 minutes. One of my best bodyguards will help you move. Well, he's more like a friend than a bodyguard, but when I do interviews and stuff, he always comes with. His name's Cody," Hasashi explained. "Okay, I'll keep an ear out for him." "Hey, Dad?" "What's up, buddy?" Hasashi questioned, his cheerful tone replaced with a hint of concern once again. "Thank you. Thank you for everything," Izuku answered in a whisper. "Don't even mention it, son. I'm just glad that I could get you out of that house and away from all the people that have wronged you." Izuku could hear the smile in his dad's voice. "I'll see you later tonight, Izuku. Have a nice flight. I love you," Hasashi said sincerely. "See you soon, Dad. Love you too." Izuku pulled his phone away from his ear and hung up. He shoved his phone into the back pocket of his jeans with a sigh, then walked around his room to collect his 2 bags. He shut his bedroom door behind him, then dumped his few bags on the floor by the front door before sitting on one of the couches in the sitting room. I wonder what it's like in America. Will I be able to make more friends? I should change my appearance and my personality so no one can hurt me as easy. I can ask Dad to help me with my confidence, Iski thought with a nod. Iski was sat in his living room for about 5 minutes before he heard 3 firm knocks on the front door, efficiently pulling him from his thoughts. He got up from his chair and walked to the door, unlocking it before opening it. There stood a tall man, about 6 foot, with light brown hair that was slicked back. He was wearing a nice black suit with a white dress shirt that was tucked firmly into his pants, with matching dress shoes. A red tie hung from his neck, finishing the look. You must be Mr. Midoriya's son. It's a pleasure to meet you. He stuck his hand out towards Izuku for a handshake. My name is Cody. Izuku hesitantly took his hand. My name's Izuku. It's nice to meet you. Izuku gave a small smile as he dropped his hand back down to his side. We must get going if we want to catch our flight on time. Are you ready to go? The bodyguard, Cody, said. Izuku nodded and grabbed his bag before stepping out of the house. He crouched down and put his key underneath the mat that was in front of the door before standing again. He wouldn't need it anymore anyways. Cody reached for Izuku's duffel bag, but Izuku flinched back. My apologies. My intentions were not to startle you. I was just going to assist with carrying your bags to the car, Cody said in a surprisingly soft tone, retracting his hand back down to his side. Hasashi had told him about his ex-wife's abuse towards his son. Cody was just as upset about it as Hasashi was, and he didn't even know the kid. Cody could tell that Izuku was abused just by looking at him. He had a slightly bruised cheek that looked like a handprint, and it looked fairly fresh. If you look closer, you could see scars on his face, one just over his eyebrow, another on his cheek and forehead. They weren't very big, but you could still see them. Oh, thank you for the offer, but I got it, Izuku said quickly. Cody raised an eyebrow. You sure? Mm-hmm, Izuku nodded. Okay, if you're sure. Now come on, we must get going. Cody led the way to the car that was parked on the street and helped Izuku put his bags in the trunk and opening the door to the back seat, making sure Izuku was buckled up and ready before getting in himself and starting the engine. And finally, they were off to the airport. Time skip. Cody let Izuku have the window seat for 2 reasons. 1, so Izuku didn't have to sit next to a stranger, and 2, because he thought the kid would like to see out the window and watch the sun go down in a few hours. Cody didn't have any kids, but he was good at reading people. He could tell that Izuku was nervous and slightly uncomfortable and wanted to make him relax a little. You should try and get some sleep. It's about a 12 to 13 hour long flight, so I'm sure you don't want to be awake for that long? Cody questioned once they had taken off, turning to Izuku, who shrugged. It's okay, I have insomnia so I struggle to sleep, but I have my sketchpad, notebooks and my music, so I'll be okay. Promise? Izuku flashed a smile before turning to look out the window. Cody stared at him for a moment in concern before turning back to his book that he had brought. After about 10 minutes of staring out the window, Izuku leant down and opened his backpack that was by his feet. He grabbed his phone and headphones, putting on a playlist, then grabbing his sketchpad. Opening to a new page, he decided that he would draw the plane wing and the sky. First starting with a rough sketch, before adding some more detail, and then he took out his colours and began to colour the sky. Cody looked up from his book when he heard the sound of pencil on paper. He had been so invested in his book that he hadn't heard Izuku start drawing until now. He looked over to Izuku just in time to see him finishing up his plane drawing. That's a very fine piece of artwork, Cody commented. Getting no response, he looked up to Izuku and realised he had headphones in, so he just turned back to his book and left Izuku to his own little world. Every now and again, Cody would look over to Izuku to see what he had been up to, only to find Izuku drawing different little sketches, some big, some small. It was about 5 hours into the flight when he felt a tap on his forearm. He looked over to Izuku, seeing he had put his sketchpad and pencils away and had his headphones resting in his lap. What's up, kid? Cody questioned quietly, not wanting to disturb anyone on the plane, along with the stranger beside him. he having noticed a while ago that he had fallen asleep. "Look," Itsuki pointed out the window. Cody leant towards the window slightly as Itsuki moved back to give him some room. "Isn't it beautiful?" Itsuki whispered with a small smile as he stared out the window. Cody showed a rare smile and nodded. "It sure is," he responded, moving back to sit up in his seat. A few minutes of silence passed by, Itsuki staring out the window and Cody checking how much longer the flight would be. They left around 4 p.m., and it was about 9 p.m. now. They would land in about 6 hours at around 3 in the morning. "Will you be alright alone for a few minutes while I use the bathroom?" Cody asked, looking to Itsuki again. "Yeah, I'll be fine," Itsuki nodded. "Alright, I'll be back in a moment." Cody stood from his seat and carefully stood over the stranger's legs and quietly made his way to the bathroom. Itsuki paid no mind to the bodyguard and continued to stare out the window for a few more minutes before putting his headphones back in. He leaned his head back against his chair and closed his eyes. He didn't think he'd be able to sleep, but he didn't have to try. Cody came back a few minutes later, climbing over the stranger's legs once again and settling back in his seat. He noticed Itsuki had his eyes closed and his arms crossed over his stomach, headphones lodged in his ears. He could tell Itsuki was asleep by the steady rise and fall of his chest. Cody took his jacket off and carefully placed it over Itsuki before settling back down in his seat once again and continued to read his book. Itsuki woke up a few hours later to someone shaking his shoulders slightly. He slowly opened his eyes, blinking a few times to adjust to the light before looking to his left where Cody was. Said man smiled at him. "We'll be landing soon." Cody pointed out the window. Itsuki turned his head in curiosity, this time looking out the window. Itsuki stared in awe at all the tall buildings and the sparkling lights. "My new home," he thought to himself, before breaking out into a grin. He continued to look out the window practically the rest of the way until they landed. Once landed, Itsuki followed Cody out the plane to the bagging area, where they grabbed his duffel bag before walking outside. Cody led Itsuki halfway down the road where a nice silver car was. Another tall man stood outside said car, though this man looked older. His hair was grey, and he had a slight slouch, his hands locked together behind his back. Good morning, Cody," the older man greeted, then looked at Itsuki and held out his hand. "You must be Itsuki. My name is Alan. I'm your father's personal driver, and I'll be taking you to your father's home where he is waiting for you," the man, Alan, said, while Itsuki shook his hand. "It's nice meeting you," Itsuki said. The man smiled and opened the door to the back seat. "Should we get going?" Itsuki nodded and got in, Cody getting in next to him. They all buckled up and began their drive to Hisashi's house. Half an hour later, they pulled up to a house. Oh, more like a mansion. Itsuki stared out the window in awe. It wasn't huge, but it was such a nice-looking house, and it was bigger and prettier than any apartment or house he had ever lived in with his mother. The car slowed to a stop, and Cody grabbed Itsuki's bags, this time with little to no problem as Itsuki was distracted, too busy looking at the house from the car window. The front door swung open just as they got out. There stood Hisashi with a huge grin. "Itsuki!" he exclaimed, and rushed down the steps towards his son. Once close enough, he squeezed Itsuki into a tight embrace, one that Itsuki reciprocated just as tightly. "It's so good to see you in person again. You've grown so much." Hisashi pulled back and held Itsuki by his shoulders to scan over his body. Itsuki wasn't small, but he wasn't tall either, as he was in the middle of his growth spurt. He was about 5'6", so not that tall. He noticed that his hair had begun to change colour ever since he died, so instead of dark roots going into light bushy green, it's now dark roots going into light shade of blue. It was still spreading, so he still had some green left, but he didn't think it would last long. Well, at least he didn't have to dye his hair anymore. "Your hair? Did you dye it?" Hisashi asked curiously. Itsuki shook his head. "It's my quirk. The green won't be there much longer, I suspect." Itsuki mumbled as he played with the tips of his hair for a moment. Hisashi's smile faded for a moment, remembering what Itsuki had told him, but his face lit up again a second later. "Well, you must be exhausted from your flight over, and it's about 4 in the morning, so..." Hisashi looked over Itsuki's shoulder to where Cody and Alan were stood waiting for further instructions. You two can go home and get some rest. I'll shoot you a text if I need anything. Have a good night, and thank you for bringing my son to me safely," Hasashi smiled. "It was my pleasure, sir," they said in unison. Once the two men had got in their car and left, Hasashi turned to his son again. "Come on, let me show you to your room so you can get some rest. I'll give you a tour tomorrow." Hasashi led Izuku through the house and into a room with a big king-size bed and a dresser that rested next to it. "We can go shopping tomorrow for some things so you can decorate. I'll see you in the morning, Izuku. Get some sleep, okay?" Izuku nodded and hugged his dad tightly. "Thank you, Dad. This means a lot to me," he whispered, hugging his dad a little tighter before letting go. "Don't worry about it, Izuku. I was happy to let you stay here. Now get some rest. You've had a long day." Hasashi turned and walked out, shutting the door behind him. Izuku sighed and flopped onto his new bed. He stared at the ceiling for a while, just going over the events of the last few days. First, he was beaten by his mother. Then he was told to kill himself by his childhood friend turned bully. Then he was attacked by a villain and almost choked to death. Then got saved by the number one hero, getting his dreams crushed by said hero, therefore ending up on a roof where he jumped and killed himself. Following this, he found out he had a quirk and ultimately finding himself living with his dad in America. Yet, it didn't feel real. Izuku felt as if the last few days were just some messed up dream. Like when he woke up tomorrow, he'd be back in his bedroom, back in the hands of his abusive, drunk mother. Izuku sighed again as he sat up. He opened his duffel bag and changed into some joggers and a t-shirt that had the words "shirt" written in bold in the middle of it before slipping under the covers and closing his eyes. He didn't think he'd be able to sleep, but he sure as hell was going to try. Hello, this is the end of chapter 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Just got a quick note before I leave. So towards the beginning you shouldn't be able to hear it, but there's probably some background noise. That is my neighbors and my siblings, so please ignore that in the background. But that's it. I will see you next week. Bye.